Right now, Tanzania is the first country in Africa to recognize gender-based violence in elections as an electoral offense. Gender-based violence in election is one of the biggest hindering blocks of women getting into politics. If you don't have enough women in those political leadership positions, your work becomes difficult.
And in this area, we do work on 3 different themes. We strive to connect the protection and participation pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We work on strengthening member state commitments on women, peace and security. And we're focused on engaging feminist leaders.
Says I'm an introvert. I don't have any special ties to Palestine or to the region. But I saw a clear call from Palestinians asking people to speak up. She says, you know what? Tune in, raise your awareness, follow independent journalists on the ground.
The way we refer to women activists, especially in contexts where technology may be the sole channel for dissent, needs reevaluation. These women should be acknowledged on an equal footing as everyone in this room, including myself.
What kind of consultation or partnership you had with women's rights organizations to bring that forward, and if you had any advice or reflections on that context?
I've recognized that women can be one of the key pillars in promoting peace and also sustaining peace.
Please, I want you people to help Nigerian women because I think they are suffering. The government is not paying listening ears, and I think as UN women, we can raise the support to help Nigerian women.
We can find each other thousands of miles away. We need more women at the peace table.
Increasing risks to women in conflict-related environments include sexual violence as a weapon of war, to lack of medical care and being sidelined in peace negotiations. And in the midst of conflicts that are drastically increasing from Sudan to Ukraine, Iran, Afghanistan, Gaza, Israel, 2023, in fact, marked the 3-decade high in terms of conflict-related deaths and the number of conflicts since the World War II. But despite this negative spectrum, there have been also many critical developments as well. Achievements realized as a result of women's rights advocacy, fearless women human rights defenders, impactful political leaders like the one we have on the table today. So just last week, for example, France became the first country to recognize abortion as a constitutional right. Notable women human rights defenders are continuing to receive our Nobel Peace Prize. We had Maria Ressa from Philippines, a women journalist combating political oppression. Center for Civil Liberties led by Alexandra from Ukraine. Imprisoned Iranian human rights defenders, Narges Mohammadi just received as a champion of women's rights and gender equality the last Nobel Peace Prize. And Women Wage Peace, a wonderful grassroots organization led by the coalition of Israeli and Palestinian women human rights defenders, are nominated to receive this year's award, hopefully. So on the sideline of international law as well, there's a draft on progress, a very important one, on the prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity, an important step forward in the codification of atrocity crimes, including its explicit recognition of sexual and gender-based crimes beyond rape. And there is also a strong global campaign just marked its first anniversary, led by Afghan and Iranian women, again to codify gender apartheid under international human rights law. So in between these progressive actions and the concrete realities of our conflict-ridden world, really disproportionately impacting women and girls on various grounds, with notable experts today, we will discuss several important agenda items around these thematic areas. And Sarah, she is now in Geneva attending some events on Afghanistan, so she will be Zooming with us. So first, we will hear from our keynote today, Honorable Neema Lugangira, Member of Parliament of the United Republic of Tanzania. Her Excellency brings forward an extensive experience and successful track record in championing policy, legislative reforms, and prioritized agendas, including food and nutrition security, digital development, community health, gender equality in politics, and NGO sector development in Tanzania, but across Africa as well. And on civil society spectrum, Honorable Lugangira is a member and advisory to various platforms working towards gender equality. So, Her Excellency, your leadership really is not making only a difference for African states, but on global arena as well, as a political leader. And your active engagements at different civil society platforms, like this one today, multilateral platforms, really represents a role model where we see your passion to close the gap of political will, as we as human rights defenders do see on the ground this huge missing political will to boost public-private partnerships. So I highly appreciate your remarks for today, and the floor is yours, either on the lectern or.
I don't know which one to prefer. Well, thank you very much for having me. As introduced, I'm Neema Lugangira, Member of Parliament from Tanzania, and special thanks to the Journalists and Writers Foundation for extending an invitation to us, but also making sure on these global discussions, the Global South voice will also be well represented. Because oftentimes you find that the story is unbalanced when there's only one side of the world having the discussion. So thank you very much for having us. Fortunately, I can say that I'm a Member of Parliament during a very exciting time. Because Tanzania has the only female president and head of state, Her Excellency President Dr. Cemre, who indeed is, I think, the #1 human rights champion in Tanzania and advocate. And this can be proven in a track record in the last 3 years, ever since she came into office. Now, I'd like to quickly start by saying that, evidence clearly indicates that when there's women participation in the peace processes, as women, we tend to focus less on the spoils of the war, and we focus more on reconciliation, economic development, education, and the transitional justice. All of things which are key elements of sustainable peace. And this can be proven by looking at a number of women leaders, and with today's topic, which is focusing on women's leadership for sustainable peace and conflict resolution. I'm just going to touch on three women in Tanzania and try and showcase what they have done, which is directly in line to our topic today. So the first person I'm going to speak to is obviously our president. Her Excellency President Dr. Cemre came into office about 3.5 years ago. And as soon as she came into office, the first thing she decided to work on is reconciliation of our democratic state, to strengthen our democratic state. So she created a presidential task force, which had a task of evaluating our multi-partisan democratic state in Tanzania, as well as providing her with recommendations on what needs to be done. And this task force worked for about a year. And so this task force was set up sometime in 2022. This was almost immediately, it was within less than a year of her coming into office. And during that same period, she had several meetings with different in the political party sphere, including meetings with opposition parties. And fast forward, the task force worked for about a year. And last year's Women's Day, she did something phenomenal, which I don't think has been done in any country. She was the guest of honor in the women's wing of one of the leading opposition parties. Can you believe it? Our president from the ruling party was the guest of honor in the women's wing of one of the leading opposition parties. That was sending a bold message that we may be on opposing sides politically, but when it comes to issues of development, we are all after one thing, we all have to be united when it comes to issues of development. And once we pass election and a certain party wins, that party then creates the government, and the government then is for the people of Tanzania. It is not for the people who are members of a certain party and not the other. It is for the people of the country. So I think she deserves a round of applause for that. So then fast forward after a year, around October 2022, this was almost less than 2 years of her being in office. The task force delivered their report. And in the report, they made several recommendations. One of the most notable recommendation was political party rallies should be allowed, so that opposition parties can have rallies, can vent, can have dialogue, can have discussions, and she immediately said yes to that. So right now, as we speak, opposition parties are free to do as many rallies as they want. Actually, the police makes sure that they're protected when they're in the rallies. So that again goes to show what it means, the boldness and the confidence that women leaders have when they're in office. And then she came up with her strategy called the 4 R's. So this is like her strategy called the 4 R's. This is what she came up with, that under her leadership, she's going to lead Tanzania with using these 4 R's. The first R is reconciliation. So the reconciliation is setting up the task force, evaluating the multi-partyism democratic state, having meetings with political leaders from opposition political parties, having engagements with the National Council of Political Parties, etc., and several debates and the like. Second one is resilience. She said she's going to lead the country with resilience. What does resilience mean? It means that as a leader, to be able to take opposing comments, opposing perspectives, challenges, and one of the words she says is that let people vent. Let them vent, because it is through venting, then as a leader, you can know what areas do you need to work on. If they don't vent, then you would never know what areas you need to work on. So it's the resilience, and she has proven that she's living by being resilient. Number 3 is rebuild. So after you've done the reconciliation, you're doing resilience, obviously you rebuild. You find areas where need to be improved and you rebuild. One of the things is having the political party rallies. The other thing, the presidential task force recommended that the government should review existing acts that are governing election and political parties. And fast forward November 2023, the government brought in 3 bills in parliament. So you can look at the time frame. It's in a very short time frame. She has been walking the talk in the things that have to be done in the country. Now, final R is reform. To do reform, it means legislation, right? You need to review your legislations. You need to make the necessary adjustments, but you need to follow a process whereby stakeholders can give their comments, their views, etc. So November 2023, the government brought in the bills in Parliament for reviewing our Election Act and Election and Political Party Acts. Again, this is another very historic thing, because in Tanzania, we have local government elections this year, and we have general elections next year. So this is a sitting president who is taking the risk to have law reform to strengthen the democratic and political space, while she herself is going to be running. Can you imagine? Can you guys even take a moment and imagine that? She is literally, our party is going to go into local government election this year, and she's literally running as the first female presidential candidate next year. But she has taken the risk to bring into Parliament November 2023, so that the bills can be deliberated February this year, which is just last month, to ensure that her first elections as running for the presidential seats are going to be done with an improved level playing field, an improved political level playing field. And everything she has been insisting along the way is, let us oppose each other based on issues. Let us argue based on issues, not personalities, issue-based. So the reform, which is the fourth R, very quickly, I know this, be mindful of time. The reform is, we brought in the bills. The bills came into Parliament in November 2023, and they were deliberated upon February, just last month. And I'll just give a quick highlight of some of the historic things that those bills have done. Number one, right now in Tanzania, once the bills will be signed by Her Excellency President Cemre, every political party has to have a gender desk to deal with gender-based violence in politics. Every political party now will have to have a social and gender inclusion policy, whereby every political party is going to show what are they going to do to make sure that they increase the number of representation of youth, women, and people with disability in political positions within the party and outside the party. Number three, which is something which it almost took over the deliberations in Parliament. Right now, Tanzania is the first country in Africa to recognize gender-based violence in elections as an electoral offense. I think we deserve a round of applause for that. Because everybody knows that gender-based violence in election is one of the biggest hindering blocks of women getting into politics. And everything we're talking about here today, having women human rights defenders, your best allies are women in politics, are women in parliament. If you don't have enough women in those political leadership positions, your work becomes difficult. So by us making sure that we strengthen that environment, we create an enabling environment for women to come forward and vie, it's a historic moment. But we were able to achieve that because as women MPs, we worked for almost 3 years on this, and we got the buy-in of our male colleagues. So it's very important when we're pushing for women issues, when we're pushing for reform, you need to bring on board your male colleagues. So much so, they need to champion this as if it's their agenda. I remember when we were in the House, there was a time that I was trying to defend an issue, and others are challenging you, and you kind of start struggling and having the stutter, and then you see a male colleague stand up and say, wait, let me add on to that, and they're supporting your argument. That's where we need to get to. We need to get our male colleagues to that level. It reached a point like people were teasing, were saying, okay, everybody is wearing a skirt today because you couldn't differentiate who is the woman, who's the man. We were all pushing for the same agenda. So the 4 R's, reconciliation, resilience, rebuild, reform. And this has only been possible by having women as a leader. Second quick example is our speaker, Honorable Dr. Tulia Ackson, who is currently the Interparliamentary Union President. The Interparliamentary Union is an association of national parliaments. So at the moment, 180 countries' national parliaments are members of the IPU. And the Speaker of Tanzania is the IPU President. She won the election October last year. Her first trip that she made as the IPU President was to Israel and Palestine in November 2023, where she went to echo the importance of peace through dialogue. She went to echo the importance of looking at the humanitarian support, looking at the challenges that children and women are suffering as a result of war. So that again proves women leadership for sustainable peace and resolution. Finally, I'm just going to talk about the point that she just made in having lower representation of women in foreign and security policy discussions. So the Munich Security Conference, which is a huge conference that happens in Munich every year, it's been taking place for over 60 years. They also recognize that at the Munich Security Conference, the representation of women in the security, in the foreign and security policy discussions was limited. So this year they launched the Women Parliamentarians Program, which is focused on selecting women members of parliament and capacitating them to become leaders in foreign and security policy for development. So this year was the first cohort, and that program is being done in partnership with the Women Political Organization. And I was fortunate to be one of the selected women in the first cohort. So I'm hoping through that process, I'll also be able to contribute further in this space. And once again, thank you very much for having me. And huge claps to all the women leaders doing this.
Thank you so much. Well, so many takeaways, but foremost, special thanks for underlining the importance of he for she's male champions in this fight against closing gap of inequalities, gender mainstreaming of sustainable peace and security. But your emphasis on reconciliation and transitional justice was very important. As we see more women human rights defenders on the ground, it's reported that more gender-related international humanitarian violence or violations are reported because as they are extra cautious of this agenda, sometimes survivors do not really know what exists in international human rights law to seek justice. But as we, as human rights defenders, humanitarian workers, lawyers, do have this responsibility to make sure sexual-related conflict violence or any form of women's rights violations are reported. And thank you so much for sharing the best practices of Her Excellency, first women president of Tanzania on the evaluation, checks and balances systems. And I think her engagement with the opposition really sends a message of unity that politicians must be working towards common human rights goals hand in hand despite the political agenda differences. So I appreciate your notes on this. So moving on, now we will hear from Phoebe Donnelly, Senior Fellow and Head of Women, Peace and Security at the International Peace Institute. Phoebe Donnelly is also a Women and Public Policy Research Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School and a visiting fellow at the Feinstein International Center. Dr. Donnelly received her PhD in International Relations from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Her insights has been featured in several media outlets, including BBC Radio, CNN, The Guardian, and The Huffington Post. Her current research focuses on the intersection between gender, countering violent extremism, and rebel governance. So Phoebe, UN's Women, Peace and Security Agenda, also known as the Security Council Resolution 1325, adopted back in 2000, was really a pioneer moment, refining the important role of women in peacemaking, prevention and resolution of conflicts, stressing the importance of their meaningful involvement in such processes. And there have been other resolutions complementing the content of this Security Council resolution. As an expert in this area, I would appreciate your insights on the status quo. Where are we in terms of implementation phases and any contemporary challenges that you want to bring up in terms of its full and best implementation? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Journalists and Writers Foundation and to the fellow panelists. I don't know how one follows the remarks around what is happening in Tanzania. That was just so exciting to listen to. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Phoebe Donnelly, and I lead the Women, Peace and Security program at the International Peace Institute. So I'm going to tell you a bit about what we do at IPI to advance the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and then I'll dive into some of our research findings. So we're actually right downstairs of this building, and the Women, Peace and Security program at IPI has been active for the past 5 years, and we focus on 3 areas of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We look at gender and peace operations, gendered insights into peace and conflict more broadly, and the strengthening of the Women, Peace and Security agenda and women's leadership within the UN and its member states. We conduct research and organize convenings to provide policy-relevant data and analysis. So I'm going to talk about this third work stream, the strengthening of the Women, Peace and Security agenda through women's leadership. And in this area, we do work on 3 different themes. We strive to connect the protection and participation pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We work on strengthening member state commitments on women, peace, and security, and we're focused on engaging feminist leaders. So this broad goal of strengthening the agenda and women's leadership is even more important as we're approaching the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325, which started the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. So I want to speak about 3 themes that we're working on to advance the Women, Peace, and Security agenda and women's leadership. The first is around enabling environments for women in peace processes. The second is on gender-responsive leadership. And the third is around member state leadership within the UN Security Council. So this idea of enabling environments comes from the idea that up until recently, the protection and participation pillars of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, stemming from the framework in Resolution 1325, were often thought of 2 distinct areas. So we have protection of women, and we are focused on increasing their participation. They were really siloed. However, anyone who's worked in this space can understand the linkages between them. We can't promote women's meaningful participation without ensuring they are able to participate safely. So at IPI, we've been thinking about this as the theme of enabling environments, or creating environments for women to safely and impactfully participate in peace processes. And this term is used in the most recent Women, Peace, and Security Resolution 2493. So to understand this nexus between protection and participation, and my co-panelists really got at some of the heart of this in terms of gender-based violence in politics. So we wanted to understand how these linkages work. So at IPI, we conducted research on 2 case studies, and I'm just going to give a brief overview of some of our findings. The first case study was on Northern Ireland, and it really looked at the gendered protection challenges faced by activists and leaders there. And 3 key themes emerged from the research: how the nature and extent of threats and risks against women vary, how protection concerns impact women's decisions to participate in political processes, and how the nexus of participation and protection is being increasingly securitized. So some of the protection risks that came out in the report, and I'd encourage you to look at IPI's website to find the full report, because they really go into detail around these protection risks. It was things like public shaming, targeting women in public community spaces, burning down women's centers, graffiti targeting women, mainstream media harassment, such as newspapers, as well as social media harassment. And what really concerned me in reading this report and looking at the research is that these protection issues silence women. And so many women spoke about how their junior female colleagues didn't want to enter into the political space or were considering leaving the political space. So we really can't have participation without this thinking around protection. So implementing the Women, Peace, and Security agenda requires moving beyond this additive approach, focused on making women present and visible, and really focused on this contextual analysis. And the paper underscores that the relationship between women's participation and protection is critical to the success of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. So then last year we looked at a very different context, and we looked at Libya and the obstacles women face when participating in peace, security, and political processes there. And there were some really interesting differences and some similarities as well. One of the main differences that came out was this gap between international frameworks on participation and protection and the realities experienced by women. So specifically, this reductive implementation of global frameworks actually placed women at greater risks. And so for this reason, several of the women interviewed said they didn't want to talk about Women, Peace, and Security or 1325. They didn't use that language, yet they were trying to implement Women, Peace, and Security without using this language. So it was this paradoxical situation. So to capture these nuances, the researchers in our report created an ecological framework of risk. And this was a framing to understand the intersectional forms of gender-based violence women face when participating in public spaces. And so if you look at the report, it's kind of this sphere of connecting risks, where we have global, societal, national, community, interpersonal, and individual level risks. So our research has shown us that women's participation must specify that they be full, equal, meaningful, and our addition here is safe. So if there's one thing to take away from this research is that framing, and we've been really pleased to see that used by Security Council members and other member states. So again, it's full, equal, meaningful, and safe, because those are all really interlinked, and we must make that call. And so the report really recommends prioritizing Security Council Resolution 2493 to create these enabling environments. A second area we're looking at is what we are terming, or using the term, gender responsive leadership, and seeing this as a skill that can be built. And a gender responsive leader is someone in a leadership position who actively works towards equality for all women and men, both in their workplace and in operations. They use their existing leadership and management skills to achieve their institutional goals on gender equality, considering the structural and systemic issues that lead to discrimination and inequality. So these leaders are focused on promoting diverse voices by giving these voices power to make permanent institutional level changes. What's really important about this, and I know we just were talking about bringing men into this, is that gender responsive leadership is a skill that can be trained. And there are ongoing trainings within the UN context, specifically within UN peacekeeping, to get this gender responsive leadership training and skill base. So it's really an area we can push leaders of all genders to build. Finally, member state leadership within the UN Security Council, probably one of the most challenging areas I'll speak about. But last week at IPI, we hosted an event focused on the elected 10, or the E10 members of the Security Council. And we had a chance to hear lessons from representatives from Ireland, Norway, and Sierra Leone, so current and past E10 members, talking about how they use this role to advance women, peace, and security. Norway and Ireland really spoke about their history with engaging in peace processes and how that made them decide what to prioritize and frame things on the Security Council. And the quote that really resonated from that for me is them saying, including women in peace processes and giving them these leadership platforms is not a nice thing to do, but a smart thing to do. As some of you may know, the Security Council members are invited to sign on to the shared commitments on women, peace, and security. And this is a tool for Security Council members to unite around advancing the women, peace, and security agenda in the council. And advancement can look differently in different ways, but it's a way to keep WPS moving despite some of the silos and delays within the Security Council. And so the shared commitments focus on facilitating women's participation as briefers in council meetings, including gender perspectives in council meetings, and promoting transparency and advancing the women, peace, and security agenda. And currently 11 Security Council members have signed on to them. So again, thinking about 11 members have made that commitment, and this is a civil society space, so an opportunity to be holding people accountable for that. An analysis has shown that shared commitments has led to an increase in women civil society briefers at the Security Council, but a key gap council members are grappling with, and linking to some of what's already been discussed, is that these women briefers are often facing reprisals due to the heightened visibility of women. So again, focusing on enabling their participation, but ensuring that there are safety precautions in place. Sierra Leone spoke on the panel and encouraged us to be asking every briefer who's talking about any peace talks to ask where are the women leaders, who's brought into the room, whose leadership is amplified, and continuing to raise the issue and ask the questions, and using the power that we all have to be raising these questions. So I'll conclude here, but I hope these remarks have highlighted tangible ways that people of all genders from different institutions, civil society, member states, the UN, can and must and are required to, and commitments that have already been made to advance the women, peace, and security agenda through women's leadership. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Phoebe, for sharing the findings of IPI on several country case studies. And adding on to your remarks, I think more and more countries are embracing a feminist foreign policy norms, integrating that into their governments, which is a wonderful progress. Not enough, but also always I believe achievements must be polished as much as possible. And in the upcoming, there's a new agenda for peace in the progress, which also includes a summit of the future this coming up September. And one of the main working areas in that summit is empowering youth, which also incorporates empowering young decision makers, which was also reflected in Phoebe's remarks. We need more young women also taking such offices at decision-making bodies and at UN's different youth-related offices. We see more and more meaningful engagement opportunities. So another plus around the way. And I can't really pass along without saying this, but the role of media in framing women decision makers, women politicians are also very hindering time to time. We have witnessed how the former women presidents of New Zealand and Finland were really abused by the media discourse, how their social life was projected in very irrelevant means and everything. So I hope we will have more time to discuss these in the Q&A as well. So moving on. We will now hear from Sarah as she's tuning over Zoom. She's the founder and CEO of Ehtasab, a security app, and she's going to be discussing facilitating technological advancements. Sarah Wahidi is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Ehtasab, Afghanistan's first civic technology startup. Ehtasab helps users in Afghanistan navigate gunfire, roadblocks, explosions, and other security risks through its app. Created by Sarah in June 2020 amidst the Taliban regime's takeover, it maps out locations of reported incidents, allowing users to receive real-time alerts. Sarah was also named as one of the Time magazine's Next Generation Leaders in 2021 and was among MIT Technology Review's Innovators Under 35 in 2022. She's currently pursuing her degree on data science and urban studies at Columbia University. So Sarah, maybe towards the end, I'll show you the room, but we're exceeded the full house capacity. Everyone is, I'm pretty sure, very excited to hear your remarks as a rising star already. I've been following your work and quite fond of how innovative leadership style that you have been embracing. And this coming August, it's going to be the third year of Taliban's brutal takeover. We have documented a swift setback on human rights for all, but devastation on women's rights and girls and women's access to education has been really horrible. And I have been privileged to host various Afghan Hazara women human rights defenders, former politicians at our decision makers at our events, standing in solidarity, trying to create more platforms to make their voice presence more visible. But I'm extra appreciative of your contributions because you're a tech leader as well, a tech social entrepreneur. So please tell us more about this app and how technology and AI in our day plays a difference and contributes meaningfully to our fight against closing this gap of gender equality and women's empowerment, given the rapid developments in this area. So let's tune into Vonia Womack now, the Executive Director of Refugees Unknown Stories Untold. Vonia Womack is an acclaimed global borders. You have been instrumental in providing training, mentoring to civil leaders, especially in the areas of conflict or recovering from such incidents. You were in Libya at a time of transitional justice and recently engaged with women grassroots leaders in Israel and Palestine, spoke at conferences in Morocco, covered Turkey at various platforms. So what difference do women human rights defenders, grassroots movements led by women bring to the table, and how, please tell us more about this cohesive approach of women civil society leaders, resulting in more sustainable and long-lasting peace.
All right, so I'm following some pretty great speakers here, so hopefully I can keep you with me. So, you know, what I want you to do for just a second is imagine something here with me. Imagine that you're standing at the edge of a cliff. You're looking out over a landscape that stretches far beyond the horizon. Now imagine that in this vast expanse, there are areas where the ground shakes with turmoil of conflict. Skies darken with the smoke of strife, and the air is heavy, and there's a silence of lost voices. Yet, amidst this chaos, are beacons of light and hope. Now, over the past 30 plus years, I've been involved in some way or some form in the work of peacemaking. When I was thinking about how this started,
Just say next album.
and you'll do, okay, so go down to the table. There we go. Next, there we go. Okay, so when I was thinking about how this started, I remembered my time as, you know, with my family when I was growing up, and in a sense, this table that you see here was a peacemaker's table. Now, a table where our family had dinners, including talking about current events where homework was done, and world history and topics were talked about. It was a place, you know, where those family meetings, if you know what I'm talking about, where I'm sure it was my brother and sister who did something and it wasn't me. But it was a symbol for that too. It was a place of coming together where everyone had a place at the table. Even the international students that came, the visitors from Russia, Japan, Jordan, and Israel. I was privileged. My mother was a teacher, my father a professor, and I grew up in a pacifist home. I learned about peace and reconciliation and conflict resolution vocabulary at a young age. Maybe it was my home faith community of a Mennonite upbringing and schooling or being taught by teachers and professors who lived and worked in conflict zones. Perhaps it was a sense of empathy and compassion that developed through my studies abroad, where I lived in conflict regions like Central America and the Middle East. I believe it was really a mix of all those things. I like to think in some way I had strived in my own way to be a beacon of light and hope for others. Whether it was in conflict resolution for business administrators, teaching students about conflict zones in academic institutions, internationalizing campuses and starting global centers or starting NGOs, consulting on leadership for transitional councils after wars, or publishing on conflict and women. I've made it a part of my life's mission to help bring people to the peacemaker's table and to highlight those who serve as beacons of light and hope for those serving in conflict zones, for those that live in them, and for those who bring awareness and movements for a future that permeates peace, justice, and equality. So the invitation to come to the peacemaker table symbolizes our collective resolve to contribute in any way possible with whatever resources we have at our disposal. I was reminded of a favorite Dari proverb, which was told to me by a friend who had dedicated her life to empowering women in Afghanistan. Next slide. Drop by drop, a river is made. If each of us contributes a drop, we can create a river together. We can bring about significant change. So women working in conflict zones and within the peace and conflict arena have some cohesive approaches to which I want to introduce you. But I'm also going to introduce you to some women peacemakers who are recognized and some who work tirelessly on the sidelines and deserve our recognition today. So let's look at these cohesive approaches. Next slide. One is a commitment to peace, the participation in the peace process, right? Calling on other women to the peacemakers table. What's missing here is their seat at the table in formal peace negotiation processes. So did you know that in 2022, only 6 out of 18 peace agreements included provisions specifically related to girls, women, or gender? We need to work harder by getting more women involved and calling it in to being sidelined from critical negotiations. We can do more than lead successfully at the local level. How do we do this? Start by calling other women to what I call the peacemakers table. If we don't have a seat at the table, let's create a table where we make a seat for ourselves. We make ourselves the chairs for others. Wouldn't it be great to have a table so crowded that it just kept getting longer? Envision it, because you can build it. Another cohesive approach for women peacemakers who work in conflict zones is to look ahead. So look ahead at the U.S. Secretary General's policy brief on the new agenda for peace and plan. Plan how women can be at the front of confronting the complex challenges that are facing global peace and security. Women should be involved at the forefront of the future of peacekeeping operations. As we rethink peace-building strategies by looking at the past and addressing the future, women need to be encouraged, as we heard, to be in technology, local community engagement, and leadership positions within the peace processes. Women must have a front seat if this is a collective effort for us to get sustainable peace. We must plan ahead. Financial support is one of the new challenges for NGOs. Well, I really shouldn't say it's new, right? But working on complexities of global peace and security, but along with larger funding issues within agencies and international institutions. More funding routes for women that are involved in peace working are needed, and an empowerment tool it can be that can enhance their skills and foster a more inclusive economic environment. So another cohesive approach is inclusivity and participation. We must include and ensure women are involved in all stages of peacemaking. This includes capacity building and investing in women. Bring in women trainers. Have women build the programs for women peace builders. We're faced today with escalating conflicts, displacement, and authoritarian governance, with over 600 million women and girls living in conflict-affected regions. Military expenditures dwarf the capacity for humanitarian aid, and that just leads to an alarming increase in the number of forcibly displaced people. Without intervention, if we stay on this path, it's only going to lead us to further erosion of women's rights, and as women, we will see increased vulnerability and increased violence. So let us commit to bringing more women to the peacemakers table. Those in the room here overlooking the United Nations might be working on these things already. Maybe you're a policymaker, a human rights expert. Maybe you're an NGO administrator, peace activist, civil society member. For those who are listening online, you might be a mother, a social worker, a lawyer, a businesswoman, a teacher, journalist, or maybe you're a student. If you haven't leaped yet, find it within yourself to come to the peacemakers table, because we need you. The world needs you right now, today. And final, a cohesive approach could be recognition. So we must celebrate each other, amplify our voices and the stories of women that work tirelessly for peace, whether they are in a conflict area of the world that we know something about, or working in a remote region to bring communities together in dialogue around topics that we know lead to human rights violations, persecutions, forced migration. So let us recognize those who work in interfaith as well, because they are part of the peacemakers table. Those who from their own homes and tables, highlight them. Highlight the plight and conflicts that they do, that they work on through social media, doing what they can to make a difference. Because we as women must elevate each other. Slide 6. There we go. So my journey into understanding the complexity of peace and conflict began 32 years ago. Don't do the math. And that was in 1992 when I was a junior in college studying abroad in the Middle East. Living among Palestinians and Israelis, I gained invaluable insights into their lives, their hopes, and their fears. This experience, enriched by discussions with policymakers, faction groups, professors, rabbis, and Islamic scholars across Egypt, Jordan, and Israel, provided me with a profound understanding of the region's historical religious significance and its enduring conflict. Next slide. Fast forward with me now to October of this last year, when I returned to the region, now deeply involved with two inspiring organizations, Women of the Sun, a Palestinian NGO, and Women Wage Peace, an Israeli NGO. I participated in what was called the Mother's March. It was an event that saw over 1,500 Israeli and Palestinian women come together, united for peace. They were urging people to come to the negotiating table. The march was a powerful demonstration of unity and determination, and I'll tell you what, it was attended by diplomats and representatives worldwide. However, my journey also brought me face to face with the harsh realities of conflict. In a basement bunker near Gaza, amidst the terror of ongoing airstrikes, I experienced firsthand the fear and uncertainty that grips those that live in conflict zones. The sound of the Iron Dome, the bombs, the planes, the helicopters that hovered over the house. I knew where they had come from. I knew death was imminent. I saw smoke at the port. I saw the fear in the eyes of those hosting me. I heard the fear in the voices of those back home and the steadiness of my fellow peacemakers working 24/7 to get me out. You know, the peacemakers at the table are now shaken to their core. And once again, they have to rebuild. Only this time, the setbacks are more challenging. And they might take longer, but these women have persisted in their movements. So this harrowing experience, coupled with the loss of individuals I had come to know and respect, shook me, as you can tell. It shook me to my core. I won't ever forget it, but I will continue to bring people to the peacemakers table for all of my friends. My friends in the West Bank, my friends in the West Bank, my friends in Gaza, and my friends throughout Israel. I realize talking about this war is like walking through a minefield. When speaking to some audiences, I hope that you will listen today without judgment, without looking through your own lens and your own lived experiences and history, but rather as a peacemaker. One who recognizes that if women want to build more cohesive practices, we must draw from others' lived experiences and sit beside each other at the peace table. So 3 women from Women Wage Peace lost their lives on October 7, including Vivian Silver, a co-founder of Women Wage Peace. About 1,200 people were killed and 253 others were taken hostage. The hostages are still not released and their families hold on to hope. You all know that. When I left Israel, we thought Vivian from Kibbutz Be'eri had been kidnapped, only to find out later her remains were found. I had just talked to her about her grandchildren and how they loved to swing together. She spent her time taking children from Gaza to medical clinics and hospitals. Next slide, 10. There were over 300 members of Women of the Sun located in Gaza. There have been at least 27 of those women peacemakers who have lost their lives. More than 31,000 people have been killed in Gaza since October 7, and today we have lost more brave women who contributed to Women of the Sun and their peacemaking efforts. Some of those women have lost their children and other family members. These women took the big risks of promoting peace in a space that didn't lend a hand to their voice. Slide 11. Women of the Sun founder, Reem Hajara, and Women Wage Peace founder, Yel Adni, are two remarkable women who have been working for peace for over 10 years, and in the last 5 years have come together to build a movement of women from the West Bank, Gaza, and all over Israel, calling for peace to stop the killing of their children. They have done it, and they still do it together. Both women come to the peacemakers' table as having experienced death in their families from the conflicts, and do so many of the women involved in the movement as well. And I'm happy to tell you that if you pick up a recent copy of Times Magazine, you will find these two listed as Times Women of the Year. Their journey is a story of individual success and a beacon of hope for peace advocates worldwide. They have also been nominated, as Cemre had said, for the Nobel Peace Prize. Next slide. Others I want you to see are those who work as peacemakers around the world, like Huda Akwab, a pioneer in peace building and women's rights, the first woman on the ground ALMEP coordinator in the West Bank, and a contributor to the Security Council Resolution 1325. Huda and I actually found out we went to the same school where I studied abroad in the Middle East, and where she did her graduate work in conflict resolution, Eastern Mennonite University. So that tells you something. If we can find each other thousands of miles away, we need more women at the peace table. Peace builder Deborah Paul, a London photographer, created a program in Bethlehem that brought people together in dialogue through music. Katia Morwick, a mother of 5 from Paris, serves as a member on ALMEP and a co-founder of Kaleidoscope Foundation, which aims to support peace initiatives, combat stereotypes, racism and anti-Semitism, and support social cohesion. And there's one I want to draw particular attention today, and this is really important to me. This is a young woman named Ilse Ackerman. And I want to highlight Ilse today because we must see those who make a drop to get a river of change flowing. Often when we work at the policy level or we're experts in our field, attending meetings like today, we forget or we don't see or we don't remember all the voices that are so important at the grassroots level. The Ilses that are worldwide do what they can to advocate for change. We must find them and invite them to the peace table with us. I asked Ilse to give me an idea of what made this young mother of 2 children who lives in rural Virginia, decide to take to social media with a campaign advocating for change. Thinking of the topic of this presentation, cohesive approaches for women peacemakers in conflict zones, Ilse can actually add to this because some of her recommendations are actually cross-functional. We need self-care too, as those involved in peacemaking regularly need to know when to turn it off and get re-regulated again. So here's what Ilse says. She says, I live in rural Virginia with 2 kids, a spouse, 3 cats, and a dog. I have a full-time job and I live on a farm. I'm a Gen Xer. And growing up, I think we all read books about the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. Imagining ourselves in those horrifying accounts, we hoped we would have been brave enough to risk our lives and stand up. When I saw history beginning to repeat itself last fall with mass killings, displacement, and detainment of Palestinians, she says, I expected that everyone familiar with history would just spring into action. The silence was shocking to her. It was eye-opening. And so she started to look for information. Soon it became clear, she said, that we were living in wildly different information bubbles. Raising awareness was going to be part of her work. She says, I'm an introvert. I don't have any special ties to Palestine or to the region, but I saw a clear call from Palestinians asking people to speak up. And here are a couple things that she says. She says, you know what? Tune in, raise your awareness. Follow independent journalists on the ground. Look at other independent non-Western media. Look at commentators and artists. Sometimes she says people will say the news is too disturbing, I can't look at it, it's too much negativity. She says consider the people that are living it, who don't have the luxury of turning it off. Watch it in doses. Here's a pro tip. Tilt your phone at an angle and turn down the volume when needed. Yeah. I
want to make sure we have enough time for
Okay. So anyways, as you can hear, I thought it was important to bring light to Ilse, because oftentimes we don't bring light to the people that are doing a lot of that work, right? That are using their voice for whichever place they want to use their voice in. As women, we can elevate them. As women, we can elevate each other, and I hope that we do that more. Thank you.
I know from the first-hand experience, I know how heavy and difficult this experience was for you, Monia, but thank you so much for openly sharing your feelings and reflections on this. Let's see if we are able to hear Sarah now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So,
You can open your camera so we can see you.
okay, great.
The next 10 to 15 minutes is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump right into it. Thank you so much, Cemre. Thank you so much to your team. I'm sorry for all the computer problems. Supporting the missions and amplifying the voices of women human rights advocates, particularly in crisis regions. I want to first draw your attention to the situation in Afghanistan, where we witnessed a troubling case of Manisha Siddiqui, a staunch advocate for Afghan women's rights. In October 2023, Manisha was forcibly disappeared, only to be discovered weeks later in Taliban custody, detained without charges and denied access to both legal representation and medical care, despite her ongoing deteriorating health. Including Manisha, data compiled by Amnesty and the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, by February 2023, more than 35 women have been arbitrarily arrested and detained in the country for their involvement in peaceful protests. In June 2022, Roshana Media, drawing on information released by local and international media outlets, estimated that 188 women had been detained for political reasons since the Taliban's takeover in August 2021. Just last week, a Taliban court in Kabul sentenced Manisha to 2 years in prison. This incident of Manisha's unjust detention is neither the first nor, regrettably, will it be the last of its kind. Since the Taliban's takeover in August 2021, the regime has exhibited particular cruelty towards women and even more so towards women's rights advocates. The Afghan community has borne witness to the detention and torture of countless women activists conducted without any formal charges. Manisha's case marks an alarming precedent, signifying a dire future for Afghan women and their freedom to advocate for their fundamental human rights. Now, reflecting on the utilization of technology, I'm reminded of activist Tamana Paryani, who broadcasted the appalling moment of her arrest by the Taliban live on social media. Similarly, there are women advocates who, from the confines of their homes across Afghanistan, hold up protest signs and inscribe messages of dissent on their palms, initiating campaigns on social media platforms. There are innumerable women who have reached out to myself and others through social media and email, sharing detailed accounts of the suffering endured by women across Afghanistan and imploring us to disseminate their stories. This narrative underscores the critical importance of technology as a tool for resistance beyond the oppressive silence imposed by the Taliban. Firstly, how can we amplify the voices of Afghan women eager to share their narratives, extending beyond a handful of case stories? Secondly, how do we accurately document these experiences? At Ehtisab, our civic technology startup based in Afghanistan, we are actively developing machine learning models capable of verifying reports.
Recording in progress.
Additionally, we're working on voice models designed to safeguard women during the documentation process of human rights violations without jeopardizing their safety. This approach ensures that all identifiable information remains securely stored on their personal devices. This initiative is particularly vital considering the global push for numerous activists for the formal recognition and incorporation of gender apartheid into international legal jurisprudence. Achieving this necessitates the collection of robust evidence underscoring the imperative to connect with and provide a platform for Afghan women voices from across the nation, not just those in major cities, enabling them to share their stories with local and global stakeholders. Now, the need to amplify these stories as comprehensively as possible is paramount, particularly in light of a profound paradox. Women, despite being disproportionately impacted by conflict, find themselves markedly unrepresented at negotiation tables where pivotal decisions about their futures are being made. This absence is especially concerning given the unique ability of women to offer their perspective and innovative solutions crucial for diffusing tensions and effectively resolving disputes in their local communities. Expanding our lens to the global scene, this issue isn't confined to crisis-affected regions alone. Women's rights advocates across Europe are increasingly exposed to gender-based violence, harassment, and online attacks, especially those challenging traditional gender stereotypes or focusing on sexual and reproductive health and rights. There's a case point in Poland where, following the Constitutional Tribunal's ruling in October 2020 that further restricted access to abortion, women human rights defenders have faced an increasingly hostile environment, receiving threats of death or sexual violence via email and social media platforms. Similarly, advocates for the LGBTI community and those working on the rights of migrants and refugees in countries like Estonia and Italy have been subjected to online violence, receiving death threats and sexist messages. Despite these challenges, there have been some positive advancements. The Istanbul Convention, together with other treaties like the Lanzarote Convention and the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, provides a legal framework to combat violence against women advocates. The European Court of Human Rights has delineated the obligations of member states to protect women from digital violence, while initiatives like the European Parliament's resolution on combating gender-based cyber violence and the European Commission's proposal for a directive offer further guidance and support. Ensuring women have the support and legal and national frameworks to leverage technology for activism is vital and calls for engagement from leading tech companies, from mobile networks and to social media platforms. To draw our attention back to Afghanistan, there remains a beacon of hope, though, as we observe technology continuing to serve as a powerful tool for dissent, even after 3 years under the de facto Taliban regime. Despite recent crackdowns on protests resulting in the detention of activists, a small group of Afghan women on Friday, which was International Women's Day, had bravely gathered in private spaces, including in the provinces of Tahar and Balkh, to demand the lifting of severe restrictions on their freedoms. These demonstrations, aligned with the global observance of International Women's Day, were orchestrated by activists from the Purple Saturdays group, a testament to their commitment to raising awareness and challenging restrictions on women's freedoms. In Tahar, women recording their faces on social media, concealed behind papers proclaiming rights, justice, freedom, made a profound statement, while in Balkh, signs reading "Don't give the Taliban a chance" underscored their plea for the salvation of Afghan women. At an event organized by the Afghanistan Association of the Blind in Mazar Sharif on Friday, the sentiment echoed was one of the sorrow over the diminished value of women's society, emphasizing their thwarted rights. To finish, incorporating the voices of women advocates isn't just a question of fairness or representation, it's a strategic necessity for securing lasting peace and security. Reflecting on the continuous arbitrary detentions of Afghan women activists since the Taliban's resurgence, it's clear these women aren't just heroines, but also mediators and leaders on the front lines. The way we refer to women activists, especially in contexts where technology may be the sole channel for dissent, needs reevaluation. These women should be acknowledged on an equal footing as everyone in this room, including myself. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and once again, apologies for the tech issues. And extra special thanks for noting down the Istanbul Convention, and very important international human rights mechanisms providing prevention mechanisms to prevent domestic violence. I wish being signed in the beautiful city of Istanbul, Turkey, receives its name. I wish Turkey was not the first and the only country willingly withdrawing from that, but advocacy on that level is still up to push government entities to get back to the convention as soon as possible. So thank you so much on that important note. We have 10 minutes, so without any reflections, I just want to dive into the Q&A. If we can keep that very short and concise.
Hi, my name is Brenna Darley, and I'm here visiting from the International Public Policy Institute. My first question is for the Honorable Lugangira. Racial gerrymandering is a pervasive disease in American democracy. What has Your Excellency, the President of Tanzania, done to safeguard your governmental system from ethnic conflict affecting the ballot box? And if I could ask another question, I would like permission to do so.
Hi, thanks so much to all of you. It was a really great session today. My name's Anna, I work for Women International. We actually have some research this Thursday on the barriers to participation and leadership in Nigeria and Iraq, and I have a question for you, it's Honourable Neema Lugangira. I wanted to ask, from your experience, it was so great to hear about the work that you've been doing with women MPs of getting, your work around getting GBV in elections, raising awareness around that, and the fact that you're doing that for 3 years. And I wanted to ask what kind of consultation or partnership you had with women's rights organisations to bring that forward, and if you had any advice or reflections on that context. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Regarding the first question about the ethnic conflict, I think what I can say there is Tanzania is fortunate to be one of the few countries in the world that does not face ethnic conflict issues. We don't face ethnic conflict issues or religion conflict issues. And I think that is because our forefather, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, made sure that the country was built on a strong foundation of unity. And a quick example is that wherever you go in Tanzania, we speak Kiswahili. So the language connects us. And oftentimes when you meet people, you would never ask what tribe are they or what religion are they. Those are things that just are not even important to us. For example, I came with a colleague of mine from Tanzania. We're in the same delegation. I have no clue what tribe he is. He could probably guess mine from the surname, but it's not an issue to us. So best thing that I can say is countries need to work on building a strong foundation of unity. And the other thing that's done in Tanzania is in public schools, for example, you may be coming from Dar es Salaam and you've done your primary school in Dar es Salaam, but when you get selected to public secondary school, you could be put in any school, any part of the world, any part of Tanzania. So that makes, the cross relation within the country. Similarly, as civil servants, you could be a civil servant for my region, Kagera, and you get posted in the Zanzibar Island. That's very common in Tanzania. So I'm not sure if I've answered you, but Tanzania is special in that way. And I think countries should come and learn from Tanzania on how we do it there. With regards to the second one about the consultation on the efforts to increase women in politics in Tanzania, definitely we worked with women organizations, civil society, particularly in the area where they could support us with the research, legislation comparison, and things like that. But at the end of the day, it has to be owned by ourselves. It has to be our agenda, and it has to be driven by what interests us. Oftentimes, I think civil society make the mistake of being prescriptive. Civil society approaches parliamentarians with a perceived condition and conclusion. So they come to parliamentarians kind of prescriptive. This is what should be done. Whereas it should be inclusive, and at the end of the day, you need to get the buy-in. But very recently, I did an interview with the NDI on this, which I spoke about it at length. So I can give you the link later on, and perhaps you'll learn a few things from there. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sebastian Knauer. I volunteer for an organization called the World Academy for the Future of Women, which equips undergraduate female students with leadership skills. Actually, I'm from Germany, and I graduated in 1989, so the year the wall came down. And I've really grown up in an era of international multilateral cooperation with decreasing conflict, increasing prosperity. But that world now has been shattered for the last 2 years with the attack of Russia on Ukraine. So I'm wondering, what is your perspective? What can the female contribution be to the resolution of the war in Ukraine?
Thank you. So what I think is amazing right now going on in Ukraine, and I don't think it's gotten enough attention, is the way that women activists are stepping up and using international frameworks to start to build peace and think about reconstruction. So in last year, or I think last year or the year before even, in the midst of conflict, Ukrainian women revised their national action plan on women, peace, and security. So they have a framework. I think what, to me, to answer your question, is watching Ukrainian women think ahead. They're incredible in the way they're planning for reconstruction. We had a speaker last year at CSW from Ukraine saying, you know, it might seem weird to be thinking about reconstruction now, but we have to do it now. Now is the time. So to be really knowing that, you know, as conflicts are resolved, women often get pushed out. So women need to be preparing now, and I'm really confident that they are. And I think we should, you know, feel somewhat hopeful in watching what they're doing and how active these women are in Ukraine are. So I really encourage us to look at that national action plan and see if that's a model for other states that, you know, can adapt national action plans and legislation even amidst conflict to make sure women, peace, and security and women's leadership is prioritized.
My name is Stephen Kodesaki, UN Eminent Peace Ambassador, African Focal Point to the United Nations, International Association of World Peace Advocates, and also sustainable editor for Central Press News Agency in Ghana. Earlier on, one of the speakers made mention about the approaches to conflict resolution. And as a student of peace studies, I was the president for Human Rights, Conflict and Peace Studies in Ghana Graduate School. I've come to realize that one of the key ways to sustain peace is to learn to say, I'm forgiving you, forgiveness, and also saying, I'm sorry, admitting that I am sorry and working together. And in one of my submissions in other radios that I've broadcasted, I've recognized that women can be one of the key pillars in promoting peace and also sustaining peace. And I liken it to earth. Women are like gold, minerals. And if you give them good things to reproduce, they can multiply it. And anytime men are in conflict and they see women coming around, it is natural that we even give credence to women. So at this point, I want to say that it is high time women are given platform to be able to be the front lines in advocating for peace and also building peace in all facets of our lives. And men, I want to say that men here at this program, we need to give them thumbs up because they are the people supporting the women for this rightful cause. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Rita Ajayi. I'm from BPW, Nigeria. Just as you talked about peace, I also just wanted to bring to your notice that recently women and children in northern Nigeria have been kidnapped, especially on the International Day of International Women's Day, where women all over the world were celebrating. BBC was reporting that over 285 women and children were abducted from schools and also from their farmlands. So we have seen a lot of this over the years, and it seems nobody is looking towards Nigeria. And I just want everybody to please go to BBC report and read about the recent massacre of women in Nigeria. Please, I want you people to help Nigerian women because I think they are suffering. The government is not paying listening ears, and I think as UN women, we can raise the support to help Nigerian women. I know other countries are also going through a lot in terms of war crimes and all that, but please let's take a look at Nigeria. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Kinda Majedi. I am with an organization called Abad. We work out of Lebanon and work around the MENA region. My question is actually around gender responsive leadership, because I know that this has been discussed, and I know that you guys mentioned that there's capacity building being done around it and efforts to consolidate that skill. My question is around willingness to really undertake this task, because it's not necessarily always a given that people in power or in positions to actually create institutional change, they're not always willing to be part of the change. So how do you bring about those leaders and those peoples in positions of power and incentivize them to undergo this skill building? Because it does take away power and it implies kind of a rebalance of power. So how do you guys go about that? Thank you.
And as a young woman leader, as you underlined willingness, if you allow me, I would love to have Sarah to share her response, and maybe me too, very short reflections. Over to you, Sarah, if you heard the question.
And just to confirm, the question was about how to engage leaders in skill building in terms of this context?
Yes, despite the barriers, how can we boost willingness to take leadership roles?
That's a fantastic question. I would just say that I think one of the reasons why we see a lack of interest in this is because we, essentially in terms of the engagement of women or just women in general, we really have 1 week a year, and that's CSW. And that needs to be something that's much more entrenched. Not, of course, it's important to have a week like CSW to focus on skill building, but essentially it should also be something that we really focus on in terms of the long-term context. And we're not really seeing that at a wider scale, and we don't see that incentive. So I think that there's a lot of leaders, especially those who I've engaged with, whether they be at a more country level or within tech companies, the incentive to be involved is really quite limited because they know that it's essentially just like a box that needs to be checked, and that restructure needs to happen to ensure that there's some sort of leverage. And what I've seen is that regardless of these larger policy-making stages or boards level decision making, you don't really see that push. So I think that we really need to start having the discussion of how are we going to engage with these kinds of issues, not just in a, not to say tokenistic, but something that is annual and not something that we see entrenched. It would be my experience. I mean, that's what I've struggled with myself, is that in terms of skill building or getting involved, especially just like a project, the ones that I talked about in terms of documenting women's sentiments for international jurisprudence, you're seeing very small amounts of projects allocated for women and women's rights and women's involvement because it's not seen as quite important. So it really needs to be a reshifting of mindset is what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. As we're already over our time, I'll just receive very brief concluding remarks from our speakers, and then we can continue the networking in the hallway. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. I think today proved to be a very important discussion that needs to happen a lot more often. And I think it is very good to have the different perspectives from different parts of the world, because that strengthens our understanding and our learning, as well as strategies towards how to do better or how to go about things. I think my call to action would probably be, let us find ways in which we can collaborate together. And get learnings from different parts of the world. But I cannot emphasize enough the importance of civil society to proactively engage politicians. The lady who just spoke, when she started her question, she started it from a negative point that how do you get leaders to understand and leaders to do what's right? It's already starting off from a point of an assumption that leaders don't want to do that. But if the question, I would like all of you to leave here with a reverse question. What is it are you doing to get your leaders to arrive at a better understanding and get their buy-in in what it is you're trying to do? Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much all for being here, and for the fellow panelists. What an honor to be on this panel learning from these women leaders. Maybe I'll just answer the question from Abad. I mean, I think a reframe of the narrative is a tricky one, but I think that we have to get to the place where women's leadership, it doesn't look like a zero-sum game. I know it kind of inherently seems like it is, right? Like women's leadership is that taking away power from men. But I'm wondering if there's some way we could do some interesting messaging and thinking so that it's more women are leading, men are leading, we're leading together in an inclusive way. And then more substantially, I think incentivizing male leaders, at least who've gone through this training, are now putting it as like a certificate, as a skill. They're getting featured on panels. So also understanding the way that this is a competency that we can reward and incentivize. But I think really thinking about how we can, like my colleagues was saying, kind of reframe it, bring it together as inclusive leadership that benefits everyone.
Right, thank you. And I want to apologize to you for breaking down there. I talk about it a lot and I never know when it's going to happen, and it just did. But, you know, I think my message to you, I tried to make it as clear as I could, and that is we need women at the peace table. We need women peacemakers. Find women that are making just a drop. Let them know that that drop can turn into something a lot more. It can turn into a river. We can create change. The men in the room bring the women to the table. Women are natural negotiators, right? We see things a lot of times. We're innate in understanding things maybe even before they happen. And having women have a presence at any kind of peace table or anywhere along that peace path is really important. So if you're not there, I encourage you to be there. If you already are there, bring other women along with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your participation in this early morning event. And stakes are high, but we will continue towards achieving this mission fully and time sensitively as soon as possible. Thank you so much.